Hi guys, this is Grandmaster Levan Aroshidze, and today we're gonna review one very interesting game between two very strong Grandmasters, Nisipeanu against So. This game was played recently, and I also would like to mention that we will pay some serious attention to the opening part of this game, to the Grand Prix line of the Sicilian defense. So let's go. E4, C5, knight C3. I just quickly will explain what is the idea actually of the Grand Prix line for white. White wants to play f4, knight f3, bishop c4. Sometimes bishop goes to b5. It's a little bit more positional line, and this bishop probably will be exchanged for the knight c6 or black bishop c8. But anyway, the key idea for white is the same. So let's continue. Bishop c4, d3, castle, and in a perfect world of the Grand Prix attack, white also will push f5, queen e1, queen h4, bishop h6, and checkmate. Okay, of course black has the can't play his own chances, but more or less this is white's plan. So it doesn't matter white bishop f1 will be exchanged or not. The kingside attack is always the same. There is one more very important detail that we have to remember. When white will advance f4, f5, it doesn't need to be prepared or protected. It can be just a pawn sacrifice. For example, black takes with the fianchetto, because normally black answers with the fianchetto structure against the Grand Prix line, and white just ignores it. He just continues the plan that we just mentioned: queen e1, queen h4, bishop h6, and well, if black will take on e4, it could be taken with the knight or with the pawn d3, depends the situation. So we can just ignore that pawn. Of course, everything depends on the concrete situation at the board, but it's very important detail for white. Okay, d6. d6 was played in the game, but my personal opinion is that it's better to save a tempo and wait until black will immediately push, will be able to push d5. At least this is how I play against the Grand Prix when I'm a black. For instance, knight c6, f4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, bishop c4, e6, and I always try to directly play d7, d5. Well, okay, this is a little bit different line, but today we'll try to cover actually the d6 system. And I even saw that Garry Kasparov was playing few times this variation with the pawn d6. Okay, f4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, and bishop b5 check. We already know white can choose here, or bishop c4 or bishop b5 check. I think we have to take a look at this line too, bishop c4, that in my opinion is a little bit sharper than bishop b5 check. For example, knight c6, castle, and normally in such structures black has two possible alternatives. It's just knight f6 and castle, and again the same flexible structure that I already mentioned, e6, knight e7. Okay, in case of e6, knight e7, black already played d6, so d5 will be with loss of the time. But anyway, this structure is more flexible even in order to stop the white's pressure on the king side. For example, now f5 is even harder. Yeah, we mentioned that white can simply sacrifice that pawn, but black would take that pawn in much more comfortable way with the e6 and knight g7, because a lot of pieces are watching this f5 square. Furthermore, black simply keeps more flexible position in the center, and at some point black can even play f5 himself. So normally I prefer this type of variations, but okay, let's take a look each of them. Knight f6 and e6. So e6, well, logical here is to play now d3, of course. Knight e7, queen e1, castle. It's very interesting to delay the castle and play h6. We get very complex play in this line, because now playing queen h4 and attack there something on the king side doesn't make sense yet, as black didn't castle there. So if I remember correctly, Ivanchuk played this move. So yeah, it deserves a lot of attention. Maybe white can continue a3, castle, bishop a2. It's some kind of prophylaxis against d5, and we will be back to play queen h4 and f5 ideas. But anyway, blackmate achieved some progress, because he already prepared the prophylaxis h6, and now, for example, knight g5 is not a checkmating threat yet. And well, it's another kind of complex play, and black already with a delay, but still creates this pawn construction in the center. I think it's complex play for the both sides, interesting position, but not the main line. So castle and f5. This is what we were talking about, this positional and well, dynamical pawn sacrifice. Pawn takes, queen h4, and now white intends something like bishop h6, knight g5. I don't want to say that white should win this position. I'm pretty sure that with a perfect play, black must survive. Probably it's more or less dynamical equality. But normally this is kind of positions where which white tries to achieve in a Grand Prix line. So I tried to play this some years ago with black, and it's quite unpleasant because black always needs to find the defensive moves, and it's easier to attack, of course. Well, normally black plays something like d5, for example, and takes with the e, trying to keep the king's position safer than after g takes f5. But it doesn't change the case of the play, because anyway, queen h4, and white wants to do the same thing, bishop h6, and if taking on e4, it could be taken now, well, maybe not immediately with the knight, maybe already knight g5 first. Yeah, first knight g5 looks like much more interesting, and f7 is under attack too. But anyway, later it could be taken with the knight, and the c3 knight also enters into the kingside attack. So white's position, as we see, is quite promising. Just one more little detail that I wanted to say about the c6 line here, and we will need it in the future. Maybe white will start it immediately with f5, but right now it's not the best choice, because as again, black didn't castle yet, and after take, queen e1, knight e7, d3, black may play just h6, starting with this prophylaxis on the king side. Now queen h4 doesn't look very nice, because again, it doesn't attack anything. Maybe black can even think about g5 move. So it's a premature sacrifice right now. But in some variations, it's possible, and we will see it in the future when exactly. Okay, and now knight f6 move. I mentioned that this kind of setup I like less with black, because of less flexibility in the pawn structure and less possibility to take on f5. Now d3, castle, f5. Yeah, it could be played queen e1 again, e6, queen h4, d5. with again complex play, but I think white already may allow himself to sacrifice immediately. Caruana also played like this against Gelfand, and now queen e1. So yeah, we weakened g-file, king is more or less open, and the same plan is coming. Queen h4, maybe queen g3, but more typical move is queen h4 with bishop h6, knight g5, and so on. For instance, pawn takes e4, bishop pawn takes e4, and here Gelfand played bishop e6, knight d5, bishop knight e5. This is the move of the Gelfand. Anyway, I was looking at another continuation too, something like knight b4, because I was trying to exchange more attacking pieces of my opponent, also attack on c2. However, white should not pay attention to these pawns like c2 and continue pressuring on the king side with a queen h4. Bishop takes d5, for example, pawn takes d5, knight takes c2, and white has very serious initiative here. So let's go back to the Gelfand's knight e5, pawn takes e5, bishop g5, and probably here is the mistake where Gelfand already got very difficult position. He took on d5 with the knight, sorry, with the bishop, but probably this was the best choice, because now after bishop takes d5, pawn takes d5, queen d6, queen h4, somehow black pieces cannot help the king. Caruana won the game in a very nice style. Rook d1, e6, and now very powerful. But okay, bishop f6 was also winning, but very powerful and beautiful move. Rook f6 was played in the game. And anyway, white gets the decisive advantage. Rook f6 in order to stop, of course, f5 and to fix the 7th rank, to not let the opponent to help the king on this 7th rank. So queen c7, bishop takes, pawn takes. Now this rook also goes with the 3rd rank to the king side, and Gelfand resigned. So this is a very typical Grand Prix attack. So as we mentioned, it's much more difficult to protect, defense this position with black than to attack with the white. So it's quite interesting. Okay, let's go back to the game where Nisipeanu decided to go for bishop b5 check. Now, what can happen in this line? Probably bishops will be exchanged right now, but it doesn't change the white's plan. It's the same. White wants to play d3, castle, maybe later f5, queen e1, queen h4, more or less the same. Oops, sorry. So, bishop takes d7 is the main line, is the main move. However, I discovered that sometimes white plays here bishop c4, and I was really wondering why. Why white needs to put black bishop on d7? Because we could play bishop c4 immediately. And then I think I have discovered here interesting idea of white. Idea is that after knight c6 and castle, now if black continues to play in the same style like e6, f5 already is a good move. Now we will see why. Pawn takes. Okay, I think it's very dangerous here to open the position with a g, because now white simply will create very interesting initiative on the king side. Maybe even he will think about quick d4 after exchange on c6, bishop g5. Black king doesn't feel very safe here. So probably black would take with the e pawn and still thinking to castle short side. Now queen e1, knight e7, d3. And in the previous line, when we mentioned about f5, we said that it was premature because black has h6 move and there's nothing to attack yet on the king side, and so black is doing fine. But now the difference is that bishop is on d7 instead of c8. And now white gets very important tempo thanks to this. bishop f4 attacking the pawn d6, and suddenly black is in trouble because there's no simple and good ways to protect this pawn, because if he will go back bishop c8, we can just increase the pressure on the 6th pawn. And in case of let's say knight e5, white just can take on f5, and everything is hanging on the e file, and especially this knight on e5. So this is very interesting detail that maybe black will not know, so you can surprise your opponent. Well, generally, of course, I'm not trying to say that Grand Prix is a good variation to get serious advantage with white. It's the idea of playing Grand Prix is, of course, to surprise the opponent, as normally black studies less the Grand Prix lines. We dedicate a lot of time to the main line of the Sicilian. So Grand Prix is always surprising, and if black doesn't know very well the opening ideas, he can easily get under very strong attack. So it's very good to you to know these useful tricks with white. So, okay, how black actually needs to react against this bishop b5 check and bishop c4. Knight a5. This is how black plays in this main line. Bishop e2 probably. I don't like to put this bishop on c4 because after, for example, after knight takes c4, even surprising bishop takes c3, bishop c6, black is doing just fine here. Queen e1, knight f6, e5, knight e4. It's just terrible. Just terrible. Bishop is passive. I don't think that white has a good options to use the weak squares on the king side. So bishop e2 is the main move here. Knight c6, d3, and white transposes in some kind of Dutch defense, but okay, with the reversed colors. Knight f6, queen e1, and still planning something like queen h4, f5, bishop h6. And it's interesting that in order of in case of knight d4, many grandmasters are playing this move bishop d1. So yeah, I don't want to show yet what I'm going to do with the knight d4. Maybe I will double it in the future. And my knight already has interesting square on g3. So white decides to delay taking on d4, and okay, maybe later queen h4 again. And by the way, I remember Karakin against Topalov in this line. He took on d4 and then started this maneuver knight b1, knight d2, knight f3. That also is very interesting. Well, okay, knight d2 is also needs some serious attention there after taking on d4. Well, what can we say about this position? It's very complex play. We cannot guarantee a huge advantage to white, but absolutely playable. By the way, taking is not only one move here. Later, white could play also bishop e3, asking black himself to take on f3. And at some point, I'm not so sure when exactly, but white may also think taking with the bishop on d4. Pawn takes and knight e2, increasing the pressure over d4 pawn. But okay, this idea needs very concrete situation. Normally I would not happy to give up this my dark square bishop. Okay. Well, in the game, Nisipeanu decided to take on d7. He played simply and castle. Knight c6, d3, and e6. That's really actually what I like. e6. I mentioned that this structure is very flexible and very promising in order to create some difficulties in the kingside attack for white. Because if knight f6, white would play the same style. Queen e1. Maybe he will need to play h3 prophylaxis in order to stop queen g4 exchanging idea. But that's fine. Or knight f6, queen e1, castle, and white immediately can start with f5 sacrifice, pawn takes, and for example queen h4. However, I would recommend you to pay attention to the prophylaxis h3. This is always very unpleasant pressure on the king side. So decided to go for e6 line, and I think that's absolutely correct. F5. Actually, this is a novelty. I don't know if Nisipeanu prepared it at home or it was an idea that he discovered at the board. Of course, it deserves attention, but if So would play correctly, f5 should not give any advantage to white. What are the alternatives here? The common move is bishop e3. However, I don't see huge problems here for black. For example, knight e7, queen d2. Okay, queen d2 is the line that chooses the computer. Queen e1 is more human line probably. Still trying to go for queen h4. Rook c8 is very interesting move because black plans to play knight d4 and c2 will start hanging after that. Maybe we could delay queen h4 and just play rook b1, liberating the knight c3 castle. And well, I was trying to find out here what could white do, but I really do not see any advantage here. It's more or less dynamical equality. For example, knight e2. If queen h4, just knight d4. Black don't need to fear about moves like this because he can just play h6, and when knight goes back, just calmly take on c2 even. So yeah, and this is all thanks to this flexible structure e6, knight e7. And as I already mentioned, f5 is also a very important defensive idea. We need to remember this. Okay, what else? Maybe knight e2 first, b5, a3, a5, and now queen h4. However, here also f5. Now knight g5 does make sense because simply h6 will be done, and so black is still fine. And well, I evaluate this position with like black is okay. Well, happens. Black equalizes and he has a good play. That's fine. So another move that I tried here was knight e2, but here even f5 is immediately possible. c3, knight f6, queen c2, castle, bishop e3, rook e8. So what about this position? This is also more or less dynamical equality, playable for the both sides. But as I mentioned, I don't see some concrete advantage for white here in any lines. f5 of course is a very sharp play, sharp move in an Nisipeanu style. However, I believe after pawn takes f5, immediately taking here, black is absolutely fine. He just needs to discover the idea of castling long side, to not be afraid of that. Takes, and well, it depends. Knight can go to e7 or to f6, depending on the situation, and position remains, let's say, at least fine for black. Bishop f4, knight f6, queen d2, knight h5, f6, and here black can even allow himself to fight for the initiative after d5 with this pawn sacrifice, because after bishop takes c5, d4, suddenly white pieces are getting quite disconnected and black gets serious pressure there. Knight f4, rook e8. Now knight is terrible here, rooks are disconnected, and black takes the control over the e-file too, so it's really bad now. Okay, here d4 is better, but black is just fine. What else we could suggest to the white player? Maybe, okay, knight g5 makes no sense because after h6 we will need to go back. Queen e1 I tried, but knight e7, take, and again castle alongside. Take. So this time black knight gets to e7 instead of f6, but still absolutely fine for black. Of course, we don't need to fear for moves like knight g5 because there's knight f5 and everything is under protection. So now I think white should be a little bit worried about these checks, and maybe king will have some problems on the h file. Okay, and finally, if takes immediately, maybe knight d5, I thought. The same sacrificing style, but black don't needs to take all the pawns. For example, knight e7, bishop h6, nice tricky tactic. If take knight f6, castle, takes, and okay, I think white doesn't have enough resources here to keep pressuring on the king side, but he's still pawn down. c4, rook e8, black has clear advantage. This time, no attack there. So, what about f5? It's good move to surprise the opponent, but with the correct play, so would be absolutely okay. He played knight e7, and this is, I think, the principal mistake, because it allows pawn takes, knight g5, and suddenly the quick attack starts here. I think So missed here the move knight b5. He thought that knight e5 would protect everything, f7, and he would push away later the knight g5, but he missed this powerful sacrifice, knight b5. Computer recommends to play h6, knight f7, and even just sacrifice this pawn here. Well, okay, maybe black can try to have some initiative because of better development, but I don't see anything dangerous for white, and still white is pawn up. So, okay, this is also quite fine for the Nisipeanu, but definitely it was better than knight e5 for So. Knight b5, powerful strike. Queen takes b5. I thought maybe he could castle, but no. d4 is very strong move, and now after queen takes, okay, pawn takes doesn't make sense because it's impossible to protect now e6 pawn. Queen takes b5, pawn takes, bishop takes, maybe pawn takes, but queen g4, and all black pieces suddenly are terrible now. The knight is under the blocking structure of the e4 pawn, bishop is the bad bishop, knight f7 is hanging, rook e1, and black is in trouble. Now I will take h7 first. Bishop e3, go back with the knight. Everything is wrong here for black. Queen b2 is not possible because this pawn is also hanging. Clear advantage for white. So, okay, I thought maybe bishop e5, but okay, bishop e5 actually was the computer move if I remember correctly, but there's no enough compensation for the exchange. So decided to play queen takes b5, knight takes e6, and king d7. Knight takes g7. This is absolutely playable move. This keeps huge advantage for white. But when I was looking deeper in this position, I discovered that black's idea actually is to play against this knight. This is only his only hope. So he wants to regroup pieces like this. Probably knight should go to c6 and somehow create problems to attack this knight g7. So maybe it will be good to bring the queen also to this another flank, something like queen e7 or maybe queen h4 later. So this is more or less the perfect regroupation of the pieces that black could do here. So in order of this idea, in case of this idea, maybe it was a little bit more correct to start with a4, because now after queen b6, white continues playing a5, and black queen will never be able to go to the king side, and we will take this bishop later. So okay, this is actually not a decisive factor in this position, but probably was a little bit more correct than immediately taking on d7. So now after, let's say, queen b5, c4, queen c6, we take, and white gets more or less the same position that in the game, but without options for the queen to go to the king side. Okay, so Nisipeanu took here immediately, and h5. I thought maybe also rook f8 deserves some attention. However, of course, black is already in the real trouble. Queen d8, he makes this reagrupation of the pieces that we mentioned, and now bishop f4. This is a very important move. I don't want you to exchange these rooks because, for example, if I will play bishop g5, take, queen also will go to be exchanged, and I don't know who will save this knight from g7. So we need to keep these pieces at the board. So this is a very good move. Rook takes f4, interesting idea, and black tries to win this knight. But here, as happened the same thing in the game, white has the same plan. c3, very powerful. Black loses a lot of time to win this knight or create problems to this knight, and white must quickly open the play to the queen side and in the center by playing d4. It's very important to get access to the black king. So this is what white is doing right now. Queen takes g7, very strong move, queen b3. Oops, sorry. Queen c7, king c7, and d4. So after some deep analysis in this position, I discovered that anyway black will not be able to save this position. a6, good intermediate move. Probably the more human continuation is rook b8, trying to bring the new piece in the defensive job. Pawn takes, and e5. The idea is that if black will take on e5, we're gonna play rook f7 and then d5. Rook will be untouchable because of d6 check, and knight will be forced to go away, and white is winning some material. So black is in real trouble. Probably black is lost, obviously, here. So black decided to play h5, and Nisipeanu continues the perfect way. Okay, maybe queen d8 again was possible, but we already know that this time white black will try to win this knight actually. We need to use that time to open the king side, queen side, and create some attack against the black king. d4. So I don't think that black simply have a time to take the knight. We already get access to the black king, so white should win. Okay, queen b5 was played. c4. Nisipeanu with the tempos tries to open the queen side again and again. Very powerful move. b4. Rook h7. Okay, I thought maybe it's interesting to play rook ag8 to attack with the new piece, to bring a new piece into the action. It's always more useful. But here also, I don't think that black can save the game. And this time bishop b2, and everything is pinned on this diagonal. King c8, queen b3. It's funny that white can even just continue playing in a positional style. Of course, it's better to take now the pawn because, okay, check, but I play d4 and immediately recover the piece. No, queen takes c4 because of rook c1 and queen will be lost. Rook d8 maybe, a6, b6, taking here, and black position is just destroyed. Even queen exchange will not save the game because of very powerful c5. And something is falling, or just white pawns will be coronated on the last rank. So pawn takes, a7, king b7. It's absolutely forced line. Check. Well, okay, rook is also possible. Rook b1, and technically winning position. So black decided to play rook h7, but the same, pawn takes c5, rook takes g7, and this time rook f6. Okay, it's obviously forcing black to take on c5. Anyway, so decided to go knight c8 here. Okay, this was a possible move white would recover the piece. And okay, I was looking at this position for a while, but of course save here the king is not possible. Also, I thought there would be some tactical possibilities to give the check, use the hanging rook on a1. Nothing works. Black has decisive advantage. So okay, white forces him to take on c5 to play d4. So tries to hold on. So white plays himself d4 anyway. Knight g4, rook f3. Okay, now knight c8 is standing here terrible, of course, closing the rook on a8. And when you look at the position after first look, it's tough to understand that black has some material advantage, because actually his pieces are not playing at all. Queen takes e4, and very nice move h3. When you are attacking, it's very easy to forget about such a calm moves like h3. Suddenly black knight doesn't have a moves, and white just recovering the knight anyway. So pawn takes, check, pawn takes, and now obviously black could resign already here. The last few moves Nisipeanu played just like a perfect line of the computer. Knight e7, queen f1, rook g8, bishop b2, pawn takes, rook e1, and here so decided to resign because result of the game is obvious. So what could be the conclusion? Grand Prix is a scary opening system if black doesn't know what exactly to play, because it's very easy for white to create some sacrifice there, to play some f5, create strong attack on the king side, and black immediately enters into the panic. But if black knows how to react, in my opinion, Grand Prix cannot promise advantage to white. But okay, it's easier to study Grand Prix than the main lines of the Sicilian, so it's up to you. Anyway, as more opening lines you know, stronger you are. Hope you liked my video and the game. See you next time. Bye bye.